Let's review the new ChiaoGoo Forté interchangeable knitting needle sets together. Now buckle up and fasten your seatbelts because in this episode you are in for quite a bit of drama. So, almost exactly a year ago, ChiaoGoo launched their Forte hardwood knitting needles. They let themselves be, well, let's just call it generously inspired by the Lantern Moon knitting needles and, of course, the pouches and overall packaging of the golden tip needles. At more than $300, their version was certainly more on the luxury side. It looked amazing and very refined, but merely a couple of days after the launch, knitters complained that the new swivel cables constantly caught the yarn. And only minutes later, the first people reported that the small needle sizes simply broke. While the Chinese company did offer replacements, the feedback was so overwhelmingly bad that ChiaoGoo withdrew the Forte set on January the 12th, 2023. Now fast forward 12 months and here I am and I hold the new improved or supposedly improved Forte set 2.0 in my hands. As always, this is an unsponsored review. I paid $375. Yes, you heard that right. $375 for one set of interchangeable knitting needles. What do you think about this price? Too much or justified? Let me know in the comments while I unpack the new Forte set and let's see if they measure up to my rather high standards. In front of me is the new ChiaoGoo Forté set. It says 2.0 here, and I haven't opened it myself because I wanted to share my unscripted response with you guys. So I really appreciate that this is a cardboard box. There's just so much plastic going around in the knitting industry as it is. So I always appreciate when a company makes an effort to look for alternatives. Plus, as you can see, this is really sturdy. I mean, I paid 375 euros for this set, and I think this here spells luxury to me. There seems to be, I don't know, some sort of protective sleeve here, and then we can have a look at the actual set. So this is a really nice leather case. That's just a little protector here. And this, oh, I really like this. So this really spells premium for me as well. Nice gray color, I love that. And a generous zipper, so you know, sometimes you have these flimsy little zippers that always get clogged. And this really looks nice. So are you excited already? Here, this is, tada, the contents of this ChiaoGoo Forté set. Here's another little protective thing. So, what do you think? Well, what do I think? So the first thing that pops into my mind is, so okay, this is here a little latch hook or something like that. Very nice for, I don't know, whatever you want to store. But why is the pen slot here directly below? I think that's kind of doesn't really make any sense. Normal pen, ball pen. Nothing special, no label on it. I always liked it. I hate when companies paste their logo and everything. Then these are the needles. So I don't know. I kind of don't like this. I thought, I don't know, it's flapping around. Can you? Oh well. Okay, so you can remove this. So that's actually kind of okay and nice. Here, these are the needles. So supposedly these lower sizes should be made from carbon. Well, we'll take a closer look later on. So here there is a big compartment, and I guess probably the cables. Yes, here are the cables. We'll take a very close look at them later on, but fans of Chiagoo probably instantly notice. So these are the normal twist cables, and here these are the swivel cables. So it appears you get 6 swivel cables and 3 normal cables. What else do we have? So here is a pair of scissors, just a normal pair of scissors, nothing special if you ask me, but nice enough. Then this is a needle swatch gauge thing. Well, nothing special, kind of flimsy. Is there something inside here? Well, let's take a look. Seems empty. Well, you can always store additional accessories here. So this is a tape measure. Actually, it looks quite nice, doesn't it? And then here, what's this? Stitch markers, I'm guessing. Yes, so here we have stitch markers in black and white, needle stoppers, and I can spot a couple of cable extenders and adapters for the various tools, and security pins and tapestry needles. So those are the contents of the Chiagoo Forté set. Other than that, there is one little slot here below these accessories. It comes with this little leaflet, I guess. You can use this to store project notes, patterns, or whatever else you think might be a good fit. And I guess next we need to take a close look at the needle tips and of course the cables. So let's just do that. Okay, so let's take a look at all of these needles. The first thing you might notice, and I think this is very important. So here, size 5.5 millimeters up to 10 millimeters, that's US size 9 to 15. Those are made from hardwood. So they call it lustrous blackwood, whatever that means. And these are made from wood. And here on the other side, size 2 to 8 or 2.7 millimeters to 5. These are made from carbon. So the old set was just hardwood, but I guess these small sizes all broke, so that's why they switched to carbon. And a material I really love, but just very important, if you think this is pure hardwood and you enjoy hardwood, that's probably not the set for you, even though I think carbon is also really nice. The second thing, and I think this is also worth noting, that's something I instantly noticed. So this set actually comes with 3 millimeters. The standard Chiagoo set doesn't come with 3 millimeter needles, so it makes a jump. However, that is a very common size for socks, so I think that is actually quite nice. Other than that, okay, here take a closer look at the size range for you. I think it actually is nice. I wish they went down to 2.5 millimeter needles, but well, I guess they had to make the cut somewhere. Okay, so I pulled out the 5.5 millimeter needles, that's US size 9 first, with the hardwood stock, and I mean, it says lustrous blackwood, but I guess it really is. So it's faintly brown, but almost black, and very nice and smooth finish. I can really tell. Don't see any scratches or little, I don't know, fault lines or whatever. So this is really nice. Let's zoom in a little bit. So here, this transition here It's also super, super smooth. Even if I scratch across it with my fingernail, I don't notice it. So that's what ChiaoGoo needles are famous for. They really know how to do transitions. So here towards the end here, my fingernail faintly catches the transition. So it's a little bit better towards the tip where I guess it matters most. And you can see that the size here is engraved into this little connector bit, I guess. So I went down half a needle size to the 5mm needles, and all needles that are 5mm or below have the carbon stalk. So they are actually, they feel a little bit lighter, but otherwise very similar, very smooth finish. And I'm instantly noticing, or rather I am not noticing, this transition here. So it's very, very smooth. And over here on this side, well, now, also very, very smooth. Can you see how very smooth this transition is? So this is awesome. So I quickly wanted to use this opportunity to compare the Forté needles with the Interchangeable carbon needles. And I don't know how well you can see, but here there is almost a crevice or so between the two, between the tips and the stalk, and here this is utterly smooth. And you might also be able to see that the carbon stalk is a lot smoother here, whereas this is a little bit on the rougher side. I'm not sure why, I find this a little bit distracting. Why is the needle size, why do they need to do it twice? So I don't know why suddenly it's up here. So I don't know what's up with that. Maybe, I don't know. But I find that a little bit distracting. But otherwise, I'm thoroughly impressed. So I don't know how well you will be able to see this, but I examined the other carbon stalks, and you can see that some of them actually see these little flaws here. This actually catches my fingernail, see? So the transition here is quite divine, but a quality control might take a look at this. So let's take a look at the tips next. So you might instantly see, okay, here we have another little production flaw all the way around, a little dot or whatever it is. But setting that aside, these here are the normals, or here. These are the normal ChiaoGoo tips. So you might notice that the taper is a bit longer here on this side, but not as slender, and the very tip is almost a little bit squarish. I don't know how well you will be able to see this on camera, but there is a quite noticeable difference. So I'm really looking forward to knitting with these and see how well they perform. So I went up a couple of needle sizes. So this is 10 millimeters, US size 15. Again, these are the normal ChiaoGoo tips, and these are the 40 tips. Here you can clearly see how much more slender these tips and how much sharper here. There is this very flat tip, and again, I don't know, here we have a little scratch or almost indentation. Over here also quite, it's not as polished, I guess, but still, I mean, this is a premium product for $375 US. So I actually would expect a little bit more in this department. I don't know. So I quickly attached one of the new cables or cords to the end of this needle to see how good the transition is. So my fingernail slightly catches. So it's, I think, well done. But there is a tiny little step. I also attached the normal ChiaoGoo needles here to this end. By comparison, this is the normal needles. I would definitely say this one here on this side is a bit smoother. It barely catches my nail, while as here I definitely... So this transition always had me impressed, how they manufacture something so smooth. Here this is just normal, so Haya or Knitter's Pride will have the same transition. Also here again, see, I don't know what this is, so whatever. Here are some further, see these scratch marks. So I don't know what's up with quality control here. I quickly also did the same here with the small cables. So just to counter check. So I think here the transition is quite a bit better, but I still, the yarn, well, not the yarn, but at least my fingernail still catches a tiny little bit. But here, well, I would say this is something you can expect. Here I think the transition is quite a bit nicer. So this is standard. So just to make sure we are not missing anything, so I also attached the normal, quote unquote, normal cables here to the end. I would say it's about the same. Very nice transition here. Faintly catches my fingernail, but otherwise a very, very nice and smooth transition. We are going to knit a couple of stitches in a second, but I would think that's nothing one would notice. So very, very nice overall. Each set comes with 3 of these red twist cables, and I guess they really don't need an introduction. It's important to note that you only get the S cable, so you don't get any L cables, just 3 for the smaller sizes. But of course you do get 6 of these. They are called silver Swift 360 degrees or 360. You do get 6 of these new silver cables, and you also do have these adapters, so you can definitely attach them to your size S cables, and then you can, I mean, your cable does get, or your needle does get a little bit longer. There is another transition here, but then you definitely can use, then you definitely can use the bigger needles with these twist cables as well. But of course, this is all about the new cable, so let's take a look. Here are the 2 cables side by side, and you probably instantly notice that this connector piece is quite a bit longer. I would guess 5 millimeters longer. So this means whenever you attach your needle tip, your needles will be 0.5 centimeter longer on both sides. So altogether 1 centimeter. So that's definitely something you would notice when you knit a smaller diameter project in one continuous round, like a hat or a cowl or so. But of course, if you have bigger hands, you typically appreciate longer tips, so this can be a pro or a con. The other noteworthy difference is, of course, that these here are swivel cables, so I can turn this around 360 degrees, whereas when I turn around this cable here, the cable, well, twists. I mean, these cables will never curl up because they're stainless steel wire. Or steel wire. However, whenever you turn your project around or so, they can still sort of end up twisted, and this will never happen with these cables. So that's definitely worth noting. And also, you might be able to see that this cable here is quite a bit thinner, almost half as thin as this cable. So this means this here is quite a bit more malleable, so perfect for traveling magic loop, because it always has been my issue with these standard red twist cables that they are just too stiff. That's nice if you knit socks 2 at a time, but if you want to do traveling magic loop for a Fair Isle project or so, those are too stiff. Just to show you the difference. So here I can really go down with here. This is as far as I can get. So there is a noticeable difference. So if you prefer a more flexible cable with a swivel connector piece, then these here could be your new friend. However, you also notice that these probably are a little bit easier to kink. See, I already have one here. Probably will be able to massage this out again. Yeah, mostly. So these are the cables. So let's see if I can get this on camera. So here, as you can see, that you can clearly see the core made from stainless steel, some braided, I guess, steel wire, and then there is the translucent coating that keeps these slick and protects the core. So very, very nice. So what else do you get? So in this little box there is one of these little gripper things and 2 cable keys. So this is my standard pet peeve. Why just 2 of them? You lose them so easily. Then you get 2 tapestry needles. So here I wish they would have put one smaller and one bigger, because if you knit with 2.75 millimeter, this tapestry needle will get you nowhere. Then you get 2 security pins, always nice. And then what do we have here? So we have the cable stoppers, very, very nice. I always love them. I feel they look very nice and work very well. Then we have a couple of 4 connectors, so you can use them to create longer cables. Here, these are the aforementioned adapters, and then you get stitch markers. These are actually nice. So a good stitch marker needs to be very narrow, because if it's thick, you will enlarge the slack between two stitches, and nothing you want to do. See what I mean? So these stitch markers are just so thick. I think they are totally unusable. However, these are very, very, very thin. So perfect to keep your stitch definition nice and even, and also a little bit slicker. So I really like these here. However, I do want to note that, I mean, you have this wonderful little box here to hold all the little bits and pieces. Why do you need a plastic bag here inside as well? I mean, this is a perfect box. You don't need this plastic box at all. Just put all the accessories inside. I mean, Chiagoo is certainly not the only higher knitters, but they all do that. And I just, you know, why this box is perfect, but that is another of my pet peeves. Now let's take a look at the other accessories here. This is the scissor. Let's try and cut something with it. Seems well crafted. I mean, it's not handcrafted, but it still cuts the yarn really well. So I kind of like that. This ball pin here, well, it's actually quite nice. It writes well, but nothing special. Again, I think this needle gauge here is a little bit too, well, flimsy for my taste. I wish they would have put something a little bit harder. Then of course we have this nice little tape measure here. I really, really like the way this is crafted. It looks super, super, super nice. I also appreciate the fact that it's imperial on this side and metric on this side. Always very, very nice when it comes to knitting, because of course patterns from the US will be in imperial, while all other countries publish in the metric system. But sometimes you are a little bit confused, and then you need to Google, well, how much are 10 inches in centimeters or so. So this is very helpful. However, let's check if this actually measures correctly. So let's see. So these two are online. So as you can see, well, it's off. So here there's almost 1 millimeter. So when we come to 30, it's almost 1 millimeter, 1.5 millimeters of a difference. So that is, by the way, a big tip. Whenever you find these little cheap trinkets, always make sure they measure correctly. So this one actually seems to be okay. Okay, so let's knit, or rather purl, a couple of stitches together. So, and I'll share my impressions as we knit along, or as I knit along. So, they rest rather comfortably in my hand. They are not sticky, very light. But I definitely notice the squarish top. For the way I knit, they almost feel uncomfortable. So I don't know if you know the Knitter's Pride Sing. They also have this kind of squarish tip, and these feel similar. So, well, I would say I don't think they will be my personal favorite tip ever. They also feel a little bit slower. So this is just a feeling. So, but I think they feel a bit, I mean, not sluggishly slow as bamboo, but they're definitely the tips. I mean, it's stainless steel and not coated, so that's to be expected. I'm just sharing what I notice here. For the knit stitch, or here in the other side on stockinette knit stitch, I don't really notice the square tips. I mean, sometimes I kind of hit the other tip at a weird angle and it feels a tiny little bit weird, but so it's definitely a technique thing. Just sharing what I feel. So, but I think they are a bit on the slower side. Of course, we also need to take a very close look at this transition. So the previous installment of these ChiaoGoo Forté needles, a lot of people complained how this transition here caught the yarn. So, well, you can definitely notice it. So whenever the cable is level, you don't, but as soon as there is even a slight angle, well, this is not so nice. So I would assume if you use these, we can try this in a second, if you use this with a very thin yarn like cobweb or so, this actually might become very frustrating quickly. Like that. So as long as the cords are level, it's nice, but see, as soon as there is even a little bend, it catches the yarn. So I also cast on a couple of stitches with this very thin lace yarn, or almost lace yarn. It's a Wollmeise yarn, and well, these definitely are no lace tips. So I almost see myself, no. Even things like knit two together through the back loop, which should be easy, feel somewhat awkward with it. So I think it's the very tips, so the very, well, the square end of the tips that makes the, no. So let's also check if this catches the yarn here towards the end. Okay. So this is bad. So let's see if I can yeah, if it's straight and if you're careful, you can kind of do it. But if you just pull on your knitting, it just doesn't work. So it's a very good thing they added the standard twist cables for lace knitting, because I don't think this swivel cable here works for very thin yarn. So this, no, we are not, well, no, we are not becoming best friends here. I also quickly wanted to switch to the hardwood needles, so to see how they knit. this yarn, well, the needles are a little bit too big for the yarn, but there's that. So these hardwood needles, they feel a little bit also very warm and also very, very light in your hands. They feel a little bit, well, they are not, I don't know how well to, a little bit more on the sticky side, I guess. So if you sweat a lot, I don't know if these would be perfect, but I guess then you wouldn't lean towards hardwood anyway. But actually at such a big gauge, I think the tips, I mean, I'm knitting again, but I actually feel this also glides across the needles quite effortlessly. So I think it's quite, well, you know, those are just personal preferences, of course, and impressions, but I feel this actually feels fairly nice. No? At this big gauge, so I think the hardwood needles actually, they kind of make sense. So I still don't like the tip all that much here, but I notice it less. Let's purl a couple of stitches here. No, well, yeah, but I would say this is actually fairly nice. So, yeah, I like it. So here at the end I want to compare something else. So there also is the Lantern Moon set by, well, now Knitter's Pride, and these here are the needles. So as you can see, very similar. So you have a hardwood body, and then there is a metal bit here towards the end. Swivel cables, both are swivel cables, and then there is a coated wire, thin coated wire cable at the end. The only difference is that the tip here, this is a hardwood tip, whereas of course the Forté needles have the stainless steel tip. If you ask me, Lantern Moon needles, they have, well, as you knit, typically all the stalk is actually covered by your stitches. So here you actually get to feel, because your index finger or whatever thumbs are typically touching the tip. Here you get the hardwood feeling, and also this is a little bit more polished and slippery, while this one is a little bit, well, duller, but I actually think that makes them feel less sticky. Interestingly enough, the tips are very similar. So the Forté needles, the taper is a little bit longer, but otherwise they are more or less the same. The transition here towards the cable is also very similar. This one here is utterly noticeable. Here there's a tiny little step. These here are more or less the same. So I can't really see a difference other than the fact that this is a little bit longer. Of course, we also need to look at the swivel cables. So in this case, so these are swivel cables as well, but they don't catch the yarn, at least not as much, at least not in my experience. So this has definitely nothing to do with the swivel cables themselves, but rather with the way ChiaoGoo produces these cables. We are back here in my studio for some final thoughts. Do I think the ChiaoGoo Forté 2.0 is worth it? Well, actually, no, I don't think so. Let me explain. So I really like this leather pouch. I mean, it's a bit on the bigger side, but it's well crafted. It's a clean design without much frills. I really appreciate that, and it really gives me, well, this premium feeling that I paid $375 for. That being said, the accessories really don't measure up. The needle gauge is kind of flimsy, and the tape measure and the scissors, those are all items I could get in a similar or better quality or on Temu for $2 and maybe on Etsy for $5. On top of that, I don't actually feel it makes all that much sense. So I personally don't put my interchangeable knitting needle sets into my project bag, and especially not such a big pouch. Why? Well, because when I knit a lace shawl, I don't suddenly decide on a whim that I need to switch to 10mm needles. So, and since I don't, why would I put the whole set into my pouch just to access the tape measure or the scissors? So ultimately, there's a lot of luggage you carry along, and ultimately luggage you pay for. On top of that, you really kind of need to consider that this is actually quite stiff, and there is not all that much more room for further accessories. I mean, there is this one little compartment here, but that's it. With the normal or the cotton bags, I mean, while I think they are totally atrocious, at least you can fit in so much more, and there are actually even further slots for further needle tips. Here, that's about it where you can fit in, despite being almost twice the size. And also, I don't actually think the position of that ball pen and this hook is all that ideal. Now, I do like the fact that these little connector pieces come in this little box. It makes things so much easier to access rather than, fishing for them in a fabric compartment. When it comes to the knitting needles, I'm really impressed by the smooth and neat transition. I guess that's ChiaoGoo's #1 benefit, and the Forté needles certainly don't disappoint. As I said, I really like the Carbon's needles, but Knitter's Pride never managed to smoothen out the quite noticeable transition. So if you like Carbon needles, these could actually be your best bet. For me, the very tips are a tiny little bit too square, too bulky, and a little bit too cumbersome. It's just a fraction of a millimeter here and there, but these fractions really matter. I don't think they work well for a tight knitter like myself, who favors more complicated patterns and more complicated stitches. If you are a loose knitter, you prefer simple patterns with a lot of stockinette stitch and bigger knitting needles, and you prefer to go at a slower pace, well, I think these actually could be nice. Now, when it comes to the cables, well, I like the fact that there are so many of them, and that the new swivel cables are just so flexible. That always has been my #1 issue with the red twist cables. But the way they catch the yarn, that will and would drive me insane. And it's nothing new. When they launched the 40 needles 12 months ago, or 13 I think, that was probably the #1 critique. So they had 12 months to work on that, and it's not like it's impossible, because Lantern Moon or Higher really managed to create cables that, they catch the yarn ever so often, but not that extreme. So the fact that there are 9 cables in the set, that's nice, even though I still don't really enjoy the fact that you need 2 cable sizes, the S and the L, especially as the new set, as far as I know, you can't go below 2.75 millimeters. So for the normal ChiaoGoo needles, where you can go to, I think their smallest interchangeable knitting needle is 1.5 millimeters or even 1 millimeter. It kind of makes sense that you need to go down and need different cables, but here you actually don't go down. So to me, it makes even less sense for this set. Why not just 1 cable? Now, in terms of quality control, I am also less than impressed. My set came with multiple needles that had multiple flaws. Now, mind you, other sets from other brands aren't perfect either, but these don't cost well over $300. So there should be different standards. If I pay $50 for a Knitter's Pride set, well, I can't really expect all that much. But if I pay $375 for a set, my standards price are pretty high, and if you compare that to the Signature Needle Arts needles, I mean, they're in the process of closing down, but they certainly have better quality control, and I never ended up with a pair or a set of needles that were even slightly scratched or so. So, you know, that's the kind of standard you have to set here. Overall, I would say it's a nice set. But I really cannot understand how on earth they arrived at the price point. It's more than twice as expensive as the normal Chiagoo sets or the very comparable Lantern Moon set by Knitter's Pride. Both cost in the range of $150. So, I mean, essentially you are paying $200 for a leather pouch, a cardboard box, 3 additional cables, a tape measure, and a pair of scissors, with no noticeable quality improvement in the needle tip department. I don't know, to me it almost feels like a scam, and I really feel ripped off. I mean, I appreciate that they took the time to address some of the customer feedback and improve the stability of these smaller knitting needles, but other than that, I mean, this really is a hard pass for me. Of course, if money is no consideration, go try them. Otherwise, I would say there are other sets and other brands where you get a lot more bang for your buck. Either way, I hope you enjoyed my ChiaoGoo Forté 2.0 set review. Comment below with your impressions. Would you buy this set? Do you think the price is justified, or is it too much? Happy knitting and enjoy the rest of your day. I really don't understand what I paid for, really.